Morning, everyone. Sorry, Sue, I changed my mind. I did want the table after all. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. My name is Shane, and I'm one of the pastors here. I don't normally advocate for text messaging in a church service. However, this morning we're going to make a slight exception. So Simon did mention that he was a stand-in. I thought he did an excellent job, by the way. I think we're all very familiar with what's happening in a week's time. He was a stand-in host this morning, so it was Roger that was down to host, but unfortunately he's not well. So I figured it might be nice if we were to send him a text message, just to let him know that we do care about him and we do miss him. So there's these text messages that you can send. They're actually voice messages, so that might work better than me just sending a text in front of you all. So maybe we could practice and then we could actually have a go. So I'm thinking that we say, "We love you, Roger. We miss you, Roger. Get well soon." Are you up for it? All right, let's just practice the first time. So the first part, I'll just remind you again. We love you, Roger. We miss you, Roger. Get well soon. You're all over it. Now try without me. You ready? Man, this is going to be easy as. All right, are you ready? I'll count you down, and I'll be like all professional. I'll say 3, and then I won't actually say the numbers 2 and 1. I'll just hold them up, but you know what's going on. All right, are you ready? 3. We love you, Roger. Oh no, stop! It didn't work. It didn't work. All right, tap and hold to record audio. All right, now it's working. No. Maybe I'll just send a text message. Tap and hold to record and send audio. All right, here we go. I think this is working. 3. Oh, it's not working. Oh man, this is going to be so good. Anyone want to come up here and help me? Just got to get that to work. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven, ... So the kingdom of heaven is like, it's ready to go?
You don't want to send that as a
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready? 3.
We
love you, Roger. We miss you, Roger. Get well soon.
should be there, right?
Let's just play it back. See if it works.
3.
I heard it. I know that you couldn't. Anyway, all right. Thanks. I may have lost it. So my other job is that I make apps. Seriously, that's my other job, is that I make apps, and I can't figure out how to use this one. All right, let's try it again.
We love you, Roger. We miss you, Roger. Get well soon.
Sending. Sent. Hey, there it is. That was easy, wasn't it? If only Roger knew how hard that was, I think he would feel even more appreciative. So Jesus spoke about this topic of the kingdom of heaven more than he spoke about anything else. So he's super passionate about it. We're going to look this morning at one of the last times that he spoke about it. And if you have a look at the Gospel according to Matthew, there's how many chapters? 28 chapters. So if you were to read through the Gospel of Matthew in this next week, how many chapters would that be a day? 4. And in my Bible, it's actually 28 pages as well. So it's like 4 pages a day, and you'll get through the Gospel of Matthew in this next week. What a great idea. Just an idea. Don't want to put you under pressure, but just putting it out there. So, 28 chapters in Matthew. There are 7 chapters that are based on the last week of Jesus' life. Of course, 2 of those, well, the last week of his first life. 2 of those chapters are about that last day. But we have this week where 7 chapters, a quarter of the whole book, is devoted to 7 days. And so in that time, we've got a lot recorded of what he said. And this is one of the last things that he said about the kingdom of heaven, and he said it in that last week of his first life. Interesting, isn't it? Kingdom of heaven. Often when we hear the word heaven, straight away we think, that's after I die. And the truth is that there is an expectation and there is an anticipation that when we die, we go to heaven, which is great. But there's also a sense that heaven is for now. There is a sense when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is in your very midst. When Paul tells us that we are citizens of heaven. These are realities that are true for us now. And Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's near. It's here. And so we can experience something of heaven now. And of course, when we talk about a kingdom, we're really just talking about anywhere that the king reigns. So Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. However, it is true that his kingdom is in this world. In that we can be part of God's kingdom. We can be citizens of heaven even today. The mission statement of this church is bring people to Jesus and transforming them into his passionate disciples. And I think the key to this, the key to bringing people to Jesus and transforming them into his passionate disciples is to see Jesus as he really is. I think everyone here has heard a number of things about Jesus. And I want to suggest that many of them are true, some of them are not. And I think that's true of people in the community as well. They have all sorts of impressions of who Jesus is. But the reality is, as soon as we see him as he is, we are transformed. It says that we're going to be like him because we'll see him as he is. But the more we see him as he is, the more we become like him, and the more that we just like him as well. He's amazing. And what he has for us is not just once we die, but it's in the here and now. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who threw a wedding feast for his son and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. Not that they did not come, not that they could not come, but they would not come. An amazing celebration put on by the king. And the way that this is worded, it's quite possible that they'd already been invited, they'd already RSVP'd even, and they're just being told, it's time. Get to the wedding hall, because the wedding feast is ready to go. But they would not come. That's the first attempt of the king. And then it says, then he sent other servants. Interesting, other servants. So obviously the first servants didn't do a very good job. So he's just like, all right, next, let's try some new servants and see if they can go out and invite people to the wedding feast and it will actually work. I reckon for anyone, you would assume that simply being invited to the wedding of the king's son would be worthwhile. The king's son would obviously be who? A prince. And yes, you're jumping ahead, Jesus. So it's like Will and Kate. It's like an invitation to go to Will and Kate's wedding 3 years ago in London. And yet that wasn't enough to entice people. And so the king goes, all right, we need to ramp things up a little bit. And so he sends out a new lot of servants, because the first ones obviously couldn't get it done. Sends out a new lot of servants, and he says, tell them, see, I have prepared my feast. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. In other words, this is costing me heaps. I'm putting on the best that I have. If it was happening today, he'd be like, I got Mark Richardson to hire out the fruit and veg shop next door just so that he could butcher enough animals just so we had enough space to butcher the animals needed in order to prepare this feast. The way the text reads in Matthew chapter 22, which Ken put up on the screen now, by the way, the way the text reads is it could be all of his ox. It could be all of his fat calves. He's butchered the lot of them, and everything is ready. So from the king's point of view, it's an expensive feast because it is something that is very worthwhile. It is something that he wants to invest everything in. From the perspective of those being invited, it is a lavish feast, and they don't have to wait for it. Everything is ready. It's fast food, but it's gourmet. Come along. It's going to be good. Turn to the person next to you and say, there is an event. I'm invited. Follow the dress code. Just in case you're wondering, I've been referred to as a Mexican a few times today, Indian once, South American, I think so far. Hippie, there we go. I've been called something else. Feel free to keep them coming. Sorry? Potato sack. Thank you, Matthew. Just in case you weren't aware, which clearly you're not, today... Karen, there we go. Just in case you're not aware, today is Interesting Vest Day here at Siege Uniting Church. Thanks for the effort that you put in, and I will get to this later on. But again, the response is something else. An amazing invitation, an expensive and lavish feast put on to celebrate an amazing event is met with this. The one before. Other way. That's the one. But they paid no attention and went off. One to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. How does a wedding invitation end up in death? If you get invited to a wedding and you don't RSVP, that is rude. If you get invited to a wedding and you RSVP and then don't rock up, that is rude. But to get invited to a wedding and kill the postman, that's ridiculous. The messengers, the people that are simply inviting them, like if a king sends his messengers to come and collect taxes, you'd be really annoyed, but you probably pay it. If he comes to repossess your land, you might get a bit fired up and angry. No, you're not taking my land. But seriously, if he comes to invite you to the wedding of the decade, how does that end in death? It says one went off to his farm, another to his business. The rest seized them, treated them shamefully, and killed them. It seems insane. But if you think about it and dig down a little bit, it's quite possible that they get invited to a wedding feast and they're like, I don't need you to make a feast for me. I can make my own feast. What do you think I am? Poor? What do you think I am? Dependent on the mercies of the king? I can do this myself. And some taking it to a whole different level of offense. How dare he? If I accept this invitation, then I'm going to be his servant. I'm going to be indebted to him, and I will not be indebted to anyone. I've had plenty of conversations. It seems to be mainly with Aussie men that I've had these conversations. It's not exclusive to Aussie men, but maybe being an Aussie man, I talk to more Aussie men than others, but where I tell them about the amazing truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. This thing where we have this debt that we cannot pay, but we can receive the mercy of Jesus and have the debt paid on our behalf. And they respond, if I can't pay it, no one else is paying it. I'm going to pay for it myself. There's that pride. There's that, no, you are not going to pay for this for me. I can take care of myself. I'll deal with it. And there's that kind of attitude in this. And look at the response of the king. The king was angry. Fair enough. And he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burnt their city. So this is often said to have come about in the year AD 70. You see, you have this as an illustration of what happened to the Jewish people. They had prophets that came and invited them to God's kingdom. They had John the Baptist that came and invited them to God's kingdom. They had Jesus himself that came and invited them into God's kingdom. All of those people were killed for their invitation to the feast, to this amazing, lavish, extravagant event. All of them were killed for their invitation to that event. And then you have what happened in AD 70, which was Jerusalem just being absolutely destroyed, including being burnt. People killed. And this was the judgment of the king, and you look at it and go, whoa, that's a big judgment. That's a big offense that was done. The king was passionate enough about his son and about the invitation that he gave that not accepting the invitation needed to be dealt with. It's not an invitation to be taken lightly. That word that's translated as, being paid no attention, that's often translated as made light of. They made light of this invitation as though, doesn't matter, I don't need to go to that. But yes, we do. It is far more significant than it is often made out to be. It's the same word as well that's used in Hebrews when it says about ignoring so great a salvation. That ignore is the same word. How can we ignore an invitation to the greatest thing, the event? It's about what happened, the two events that absolutely cement history are the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and then the wedding feast of the Lamb. You see, this invitation to the wedding is actually for us to take part in the bride of Christ, to be the guest of honor, in a way, at this feast that's happening at the end of the age. So we are the guest, but also the honored guest. We are invited to this, and it does absolutely matter. But then we see the rest of the king's response. So the king has pronounced judgment on those that have killed his servants. And then he calls his servants to himself, and he says to his servants. So this is obviously not the second lot of servants he sent out because they're all dead. Maybe he's got a third lot of servants, or maybe he's gone back to the first. I'm not sure. The wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. What made them not worthy? Killing the postman made them not worthy. They were not worthy because of their response to the invitation. That was all it was. And you'll see later on about the last three words that are on the screen: bad and good. But anyway, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find. So like obedient servants, they went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. It says the bad first. It's interesting, like C.S. Lewis talks about how when you get to heaven, you'll be surprised at a couple of things. You'll be surprised at who you see there that you were sure was never going to be there. And also you'll be surprised at who's not there that you were sure was going to be there. Both bad and good. It mentions bad first. It doesn't matter about your reputation. It doesn't matter about your heritage and your upbringing. Every single person is invited. It's not only the bad, but it includes the bad and the good. Everyone is invited. Very comprehensive. Of course, this is all talking about our invitation our invitation to take part in God's feast. You know, every time that we talk about the kingdom of heaven, every time that we read about the kingdom of heaven, we understand something else about who Jesus is. We understand something else about what we're being called into. And so this parable is one of those pieces of the puzzle. It's one thing that helps us and gives us greater understanding about who God is and what we are invited to. Everyone is invited. But now we get to the bit which, I actually heard a message on this about 6 months ago, and verses 1 to 10 were preached on, and then verse 14 as well, but verses 11 to 13 weren't. And whenever I've read this in the past, it's been I'll read the whole thing, but one thing really stands out, and it's these next few verses. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. That's good. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, "Bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen." Whoa! And I think something that happens to us when we read that is we're like, whoa, that's not fair. The first that we hear about the wedding garment is at this point here. And so we assume that's the first that this guy had heard about the wedding garment. We're like, he was just pulled off the street and he came straight to the wedding feast. He had no time to get a wedding garment. Maybe he didn't know he needed to wear a wedding garment. Maybe he couldn't afford a wedding garment. We make all these excuses. We're like, that's why he wasn't wearing a wedding garment. My sister tells a story of the first time she heard our parents argue. And it happened up in a little place called Darwin at a family wedding, the hottest January day in Darwin in 35 years. It was reasonably warm. We're there as a family. I was 12 years old. I didn't actually witness the argument myself. I'm still yet to hear my parents argue. And so Dad, on a stinking hot day in Darwin, goes, "I'm wearing thongs." Mum said, this is my niece's wedding. He wore thongs. Anyway, I remember probably one of the rudest things I did at a wedding was wear a very nice button-up shirt and the brightest board shorts you have ever seen. I don't know what I was thinking. It was like 12 years ago. I was very, very silly 12 years ago. Those are illustrations of wearing the wrong thing to a wedding, but it doesn't result in the same thing as this, does it? It doesn't result in being bound hand and foot and being cast into utter, outer darkness. But I'm in a wedding in a couple of months' time, and I'm a groomsman in a wedding, and the groom is generously buying us all a suit. It would be ridiculous if I went, "Actually, I got this great shirt in Thailand. I'm going to wear that on your wedding day. Thanks for the invite, and thanks for the generous offer of a suit, but I'm going to wear my own thing." It's ridiculous, isn't it? You're not going to do it. I was in Thailand 12 years ago in the Korean community, and we had the wonderful privilege of being invited along to a wedding. And I made depending on how you look at it, either the error or the good judgment of complimenting one particular man on his attire, saying, "I really like your shirt." And he's like, "Just wait." And he went off and he came back and presented me with this. There's no way I'm not going to put on what I've been given. There's no way I'm going to be at that feast without wearing this. Most commentators agree that in that scenario, when they're invited To the wedding feast of a king, the king is going to provide a wedding garment for all the guests. You'll notice there's only one. The wedding hall was filled with guests. It probably means hundreds, if not thousands. The king notices one is not wearing it. Everyone was supplied with a wedding garment. This one particular person chose not to wear what he was given. Totally changes our perspective on this, doesn't it? Suddenly it goes from being, oh, that's unjust. It's not fair. How could God do that? From us judging the judge to a case of, okay, he chose not to put on what he was given. It's interesting though, it was only when the king came in and looked at his guests, it was only the king that could see that he was not wearing what he's supposed to be wearing. It goes back to the story I was saying before. We'll get to heaven, we'll be surprised at who's there and who's not there. We can't see. We can't look at other people and go, yes, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, this person is going to heaven. This person is not. We don't have those eyes, but Jesus does. And Jesus walks in, he looks at us, and we will be speechless if we have not put on the wedding garment. So what is this wedding garment? What is it that we're given? Well, we are told to put on Christ. Take off the old self, put on the new self. Clothe yourself with humility. We are told many times, mainly by the Apostle Paul in his letters, that we are to put on Christ, or the new self. It means that we are not dependent upon our own righteousness. It's not about who we are. It's not about bringing our own clothes. It's not about being rebellious and going, I'm going to wear this instead. It's about receiving what he has given us and wearing him. He is our wedding garment. It's kind of like you rock up to heaven and it's not a retina scanner. It's not a fingerprint scanner in order to get in. It's this Jesus scanner. Only Jesus can get into heaven. Only Jesus can get into heaven. Yet, the wedding garment that we are given is Christ himself. And we are to put on Christ. He is the only way we can get into heaven, is to be him. And we become more like him every day that we choose to put on Christ. Every day that we choose to go with his way, not our own way, we become more like him. And when the Father looks at us, he sees the Son, which is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm going to pray. Father, we are so grateful that you would invite us to be a part of your feast. There is an event, and it is amazing. And the invitation is for us and for every single person that we see. And I ask that today, each one of us would see you more clearly as you are. And that something that is false, something that we've assumed or that someone else has told us that is wrong, would actually be replaced with something that is true. Would have a clearer picture of who you are. And that, Lord, we would receive this wedding garment that you give to us, which is Christ himself, and that we would put on Christ. That we would spend time devoted to you, giving you our very selves. Have your way in us now, we pray. In Jesus' name. Amen. We're about to sing again, and as we do, I just encourage you to take this serious. I encourage you just to think for yourself, firstly, have you received this invitation? And are you wearing the wedding garment? Have you put on Christ? Do you choose every day, like, I actually choose your way and not my way, Lord. I actually choose to do what you want. Is that true of you? And if it's not true of you, today is a great day to make a fresh start. You may want to pray with someone that's close by you at the moment, or you may want to come down the front. And let's just set aside this area down here. I'll be more than happy to pray with you, as would some others. It may be that you've got people in mind, you're like, look, they've never accepted this invitation. I encourage you just to lift them up before the Lord now. Just to pray for that person or those people, that they would receive this invitation. If you will be upstanding.